So can we start off by having you explain maybe the difference between how the average person thinks about how persuasion takes place and, the dark truth about how it really takes place?
Okay, so when I die and I think about what I've left behind, eventually it'll probably just be one metaphor, and that metaphor is that the mind is divided like a rider on an elephant, and the rider represents your conscious verbal reasoning, the stuff you're aware of, the stuff that uses logic, and everything else is the elephant. It's the automatic processes. It's the 99% of what's going on in your mind that you're not aware of, and I developed this metaphor in my book, The Happiness Hypothesis, and then it was made famous not by me, but by Chip and Dan Heath in their wonderful book, Switch. And what the advice boils down to is most of us spend a lot of our time trying to persuade other people's riders. We give them all these reasons. Here are the 7 reasons why you're wrong or why you should see it my way. When in fact, the way to persuade people is to speak to the elephant first. The elephant is a lot stronger than the rider. If you get somebody feeling the truth of what you're saying or feeling that they like you or like what you're saying, and the elephant kind of wants to go in your direction, then it's effortless to persuade the rider to go along. But if the elephant is digging in its heels, the elephant doesn't want to go, doesn't want to be dragged along by you to the conclusion that you're trying to get him to, then there's really nothing you can say that will persuade the rider. Political discourse can work once you recognize that we're all mostly elephants. I don't mean Republicans. I mean we're all mostly emotional social creatures. It can work, but it can't work if you're psychologically unsophisticated. And this is the problem that plagued the Democrats for so long. They just kept thinking about messaging as though if they could just get the right configuration of words and put it up into message space, it will somehow persuade people. And it doesn't work that way.
One thing I drew from reading your work is that you yourself, in the course of doing this work and coming to these conclusions, maybe began to have a little bit more understanding for people who disagree with you than you might have had before. And you seem to be suggesting that instead of just writing off half the population as being irrational idiots, we ought to think about them maybe a bit more sympathetically.
Absolutely. That's what happened to me. I was always on the left when I was growing up. I was raised Jewish in New York. I went to Yale. I don't know if I ever met a conservative. I guess there were 3 or 4 conservative students at Yale when I was there. But I never spoke to them because they were so yucky and we all hated them. I mean, it was a really partisan time in the 80s, and it's just gotten worse since then. So I actually started studying political psychology. I had been just looking at how morality varies across nations, and I started studying how it varies across the left-right divide, in part because I was so frustrated with the Democrats, since Al Gore's failed campaign. I was so frustrated that they didn't know how to talk about morality. But as I dug into it and as I really made a commitment to understanding conservatives, and I didn't even think about libertarians at the time, I just saw left-right, I began to see that if you listen to people who differ from you, they actually know things that you don't know. Whereas when you only talk to people that agree with you, you don't learn very much from them. So in the course of doing this work, I actually kind of dropped. I'm no longer a liberal. I'm just kind of nothing now. I'm a professor. I study this stuff. I find it incredibly interesting. Everyone's got insight into problems. So yeah, it helped me step out of the matrix, as it were.
In your work, you go ahead and list a series of categories, and you say these are the different ingredients in how we come to be who we are. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about some of those?
Sure. So my research since graduate school has always been on morality, moral psychology, what it is, where it comes from. And in reading ethnographies, in reading a lot of anthropology, in doing some fieldwork in India and in Brazil, I came to see that morality varies a lot around the world. And it's as though there are these sort of issues that seem to just tweak our minds. They just, if you see a child being harmed, it's awful. It's like having a drop of lemon juice on your tongue. It just activates a taste bud that says, no, this is wrong. Or if somebody is shirking or not pulling their fair share of the weight, or if somebody is disloyal, or if somebody is disobedient, or if somebody behaves in a way that's degrading or disgusting. Now, I just named 5 foundations: care, fairness, loyalty, authority, and sanctity. And some of your listeners might have thought that the last couple aren't really morality with this, disobedience, sanctity. One thing we know about libertarians, my colleagues and I have done what I think is the largest study of libertarian psychology, is that libertarians focus primarily on liberty. So that's the sixth foundation is liberty. Libertarians have the strongest sense of personal liberty, and they want to extend it to others. And they have the weakest sense of group loyalty, respect for authority, or a sense of personal sanctity or purity. So libertarians are quite unique in their morality. I mean, they're diverse, of course, as well. But libertarians, in some ways, are more different from liberals and conservatives than liberals and conservatives are from each other. So my approach has been to identify the taste buds of the moral sense, and then the three major families of moral cuisines, what you might call progressive, social conservative, and libertarian. Here's the simplest way to summarize what's unique about libertarians. There are these two personality dimensions, empathizing and systemizing. And both of them are strengths. People who can think systemically. In academics, I know you have a PhD in academics and engineering, and being able to think systematically is an incredible strength. Libertarians are the best of any group at thinking systemically and systematically. That's why they're attracted to economics. Then there's this other trait, empathizing. It's the degree to which you feel others' pain. I don't mean that you care about what happens to them. I mean that if somebody pokes themselves in the eye accidentally, you flinch because boy do you feel it. Or if they tell a sad story, you cry. Libertarians are much lower. No, I shouldn't say much. Libertarians are statistically significantly lower than liberals or conservatives on those traits. So it's not a coincidence that libertarians are overwhelmingly male, because these are exactly the traits on which men and women differ. What we found in our paper, so I'd urge your listeners, if you just Google understanding libertarian morality, and then you put in my name, Haidt, you'll find our paper. It's free online. It has all the graphs, all the tables. And what we find is that libertarians, whether they're male or female, have the most masculine cognitive style. And so even female libertarians are more masculine, and I don't mean macho, I mean higher systemizing, lower empathizing, more rational. And so when I present these results, what I generally find is that libertarians generally say, yep, that's us, yep, that's right.
A point that Charles Murray has made is that when the government takes over certain functions, then certain aspects of society, of natural society, just tend to atrophy. If the state is going to take care of this or that function, then ordinary people are not going to volunteer to do that thing. And then the result is that the natural sympathy that people might have for each other is interfered with, because this voluntary aspect disappears. So anyway, I mean, I realize that's not the central thesis.
No, but that is a perfect example of how that is a really subtle point which you can't really grasp unless you're good at thinking systemically. And so it's a kind of a meta point. It's an understanding of how systems can crush personal caring and responsibility in relationships. But the average person, the more typical person, just says, oh, but if people are suffering, the government has to care for them. We can't just abandon them. So what I'm saying is libertarians are the clearest thinkers. They are the best thinkers about complex social questions and problems.
All right. In that case, I'll let you go.
Okay. Well, there you go. And back to your earlier question about how do you persuade people, acknowledgement. The key is acknowledgement. So either we're in combat mode, and you use the phrase battle stations or batten down the hatches, or we're in discovery mode, or we're in relationship mode. There's three different modes. And often our discussions are in combat mode. And when that happens, when people have a sense that you're in combat mode, they just look for why you're wrong and they just want to argue against you. But if you're in curiosity mode, you're really trying to figure something out and you're looking to someone to help you do it, or if you're in relationship mode where you value a person and you want to get closer to them, it's like people suddenly they open up, their defenses melt down, and you can have really great conversations with people. The most important message to take from that, and one that I would love to leave listeners with on your show, is ultimately you can call it moral humility or you can call it epistemological humility. It's the realization that as individuals, we're actually not all that smart on our own. We're certainly not as smart as we think we are as individuals. But when you put us together in a system in the right way, amazing stuff happens. And I think actually libertarians are quite receptive to this way of thinking. They're the main people who understand the brilliance of a market when there's no central mind. So if you realize that we're all basically neurons, and neurons aren't really all that smart, and that our genius comes from getting the system right. And then you got to kind of realize, boy, the American system right now is just not working very well. It's not working very, markets work brilliantly, but man, our political system is just not doing a good job of either aggregating preferences or aggregating information from research, whatever it is. There's something really wrong. And it's getting worse because we're getting more emotionally polarized. We hate each other more. A moment ago, you talked about why we do voting, why we vote. And I forgot there's some new research. Increasingly, Americans are voting in order to vote against something. The role of anger and hatred is getting much stronger in our democracy. And these are all worrisome signs. So a little more epistemological humility from all of us, I think would make our democracy work a little better.